Seamaster just turned 75 years old, and to celebrate, Omega released 8 new models. To be more specific, they're not exactly 8 new models, they're 8 variations of existing Seamaster models that are currently on the market. Thanks to Omega Boutique in Vancouver, I got my hands on 7 out of 8 new models. First, let's talk about the model that I didn't get my hands on, and actually the model that I was the most excited to see, the new Ploprof. Now, this model is not to everyone's taste. It's very quirky, out of the box completely. Maybe in the future, I'll do a full review of this model specifically because I'm that excited about it. Now let's actually talk about the models that I did get my hands on. Aqua Terra 150 meters in 41 millimeter case. This is not exactly a new model, it's a new dial on an existing model, and this sort of theme is going to continue throughout the video. This watch is available on both the bracelet and this baby blue rubber strap. I got a chance to check out the one on the rubber strap, and I actually quite like the strap. It's very soft and it kind of fits the aesthetic of the watch pretty well. The watch has exactly the same dimensions as previous one, 41 millimeter diameter, it's about 13.2 millimeters thick, and it's about 48 millimeters from one lug to another. I think it wears pretty well on the wrist, and it is very comfortable on this rubber strap. In terms of the movement, it's still powered by the caliber 8900 movement that has 60 hours of power reserve. It's a master chronometer certified movement with coaxial escapement. In terms of the new color variation, I think it looks pretty good. It has this sort of wooden ship deck type of dial with an outer ring counting down seconds or minutes, and there is a date window at the 6 o'clock position, applied indexes, and in the new color variation it has a slight gradient. I think the new color variation works well on this watch. It's not my favorite out of the bunch, but it's okay. Moving on to another Aqua Terra. This one is 150 meters in 38 millimeter case. If you remember, about a year ago or so, Omega released a bunch of different colored Aqua Terras. I actually have a full review of those Aqua Terras. You can check out that video. It will be linked in the description below. This one here is just another addition to this lineup of watches. We see this baby blue gradient dial. Again, we see a date at the 6 o'clock position. Applied indexes. This time there is no rail track around the dial. It's a cleaner look. It has more of a dress watch appearance. In terms of the case size, it's a 38 millimeter case diameter, about 12.3 millimeters thick, and about 45 millimeters from one lug to another. So it's a smaller version of the larger Aqua Terra, of course, and it's smaller in every dimension. Not just diameter, it's also thinner. I actually really like this addition to the lineup. I think this baby blue color works well with the case and with this look. A couple of things that I would change, I would make maybe that date window larger or get rid of the date window altogether for a cleaner look. This one is powered by the in-house caliber 8800 with 55 hours of power reserve. It's a master chronometer with anti-magnetism, coaxial escapement, yada yada yada. Pretty much all of these models are master chronometers. One thing besides the dial colors that's common in all 8 models is the case back. It features an engraving of a Greek god Poseidon holding a trident, and of course you have that Omega logo sort of at the 12 o'clock position. Moving on to the next model, the Aqua Terra World Time. I rarely talk about this model, but it's actually one of my favorite Omega watches. I don't think I will ever own one, but I just like the fact that it exists. I like that little earth in the center. I like the fact that it's a GMT watch. So this one here is in the same case as other Aqua Terra's World Time. It has a 43 millimeter diameter. It's about 14.1 millimeters thick, and it's almost 50 millimeters from one lug to another. This one is a bit of a larger watch. It's a thicker watch, so you do need to have a larger wrist to pull it off. Once again, it's done with this baby blue-like color. I think on this model, that color doesn't work as well as some of the other models. First of all, I think it's kind of too similar to the OG Aqua Terra World Time, and also the OG Aqua Terra World Time looks better with their original colors than this watch here. This one just looks a little bit too washed out. Moving on to the classic Seamaster 300. This one is my favorite out of all the different releases. I think this baby blue color variation works very well with this watch. I like the color that they chose for the dial with the gradient. I like the color that they chose for the ceramic bezel insert. It all works very well together. I also really like the fact that Omega decided not to include a date window. It makes the dial more proportionate, more symmetrical, and just overall better designed. Of course, this is the watch that started it all. A lot of people were expecting the biggest changes, the biggest updates to this specific model, because that's the OG model from 75 years ago that sort of was refined and upgraded over the years. Well, unfortunately, we only got the new color variation and a different case back, once again with that Poseidon holding his trident. That's about it. So there aren't too many changes, like the bracelet is the same, the clasp is the same, the overall case is the same. It still has that classic 41mm case diameter. It's about 14mm thick and it has a 48mm lug-to-lug distance. Still has the same 300 meters of water resistance. Unidirectional 60-click bezel. It's powered by the same caliber 8912 in-house movement. All the other elements in the watch besides the new color variation and the case back are the same. But I think out of all the releases, the colors work best on this model. I think it just looks really sharp and also looks kind of fun. It looks like a perfect summer watch. Now moving on to the next release, the Seamaster Diver 300. This model is also known as the Bond watch, comes in a larger case diameter. It comes in a 42mm case. It's slightly thinner, about 13.6 millimeters thick, and it has about a 50mm lug-to-lug distance. This model still has the same case with the helium escape valve at the 10 o'clock position, the crown guards and the crown at the 3 o'clock position, the sort of asymmetrical case. You also still have the scallop bezel, which in some cases is slightly harder to turn, especially if you have wet hands, but it is sort of the signature of this model. Still has 300 meters of water resistance, and it is still powered by the same caliber 8800 coaxial in-house movement with 55 hours of power reserve. This watch with its blue dial and blue bezel doesn't actually work for me personally. I don't really like the look of this watch. This is gonna sound kind of mean, but this watch reminds me of those fake Omega Seamasters that you would see on AliExpress or something like that. Like, they can never get the color right. It's just slightly off. It's a shade off. It's a little bit too washed out. And I feel like that's what happened with this watch. I also don't really like the look of these sort of baby blue markers. I think, again, it doesn't make the watch look too sharp. Maybe if they executed these indexes in a stark white color, it would make the watch a little bit sharper, a little bit more contrasty. Moving on to the next Seamaster in the lineup, Seamaster Planet Ocean 600 meters in a 39.5mm case. This one here actually works for me. I like this sort of washed out dial look, and for some reason these baby blue indexes on this dial work better than they do on the Professional 300. I don't know why, but they do. The watch still comes in the same case as previously, 39.5mm case diameter. It's about 14.2 millimeters thick, and it has about a 46mm lug-to-lug distance. This one comes with crazy water resistance, 600 meters. I mean, who really needs that? But it's sort of cool to have. Still has the helium escape valve at the 10 o'clock position, powered by the same movement, caliber 8800. Still has the same bracelet as previous models, and still has no crown guards. And the crown is still at the 3 o'clock position. And of course, also the date is at the 3 o'clock position. The date wheel is done in this sort of dark blue color to match the rest of the watch. I think the new colors work well for this watch. It's one of the top ones out of the release. I like that sort of washed out look to the dial. It almost looks like washed out jeans. I like it. I think it looks pretty sharp with this watch. And finally, the last watch we're going to talk about today, the Seamaster Ultra Deep 6000 meters. I think this one here actually has been paid attention to the most, which is sort of surprising because it's one of the newer models in the Seamaster lineup. First, let's talk about the case. It stayed unchanged 45.5 millimeters diameter, about 18 millimeters thickness, and about 52 millimeters lug-to-lug distance. It sounds monstrous, but it's actually surprisingly wearable. This watch, I don't know what type of magic they did, but it sort of wears all right. I wouldn't really wear this watch on a daily basis, but sort of once in a while to kind of showcase that 6,000 meters water resistance, yeah, it's kind of cool. What really works for me with this watch is the bezel and the dial. First of all, the ceramic bezel with its baby blue markings looks very sharp. It's sort of a similar bezel to the other models in the lineup, but it's a shade darker, and I think that contrast between a darker blue and a baby blue with the markings works really well. It actually makes the markings stand out more. I also really love the look of this dial. At the regular lighting conditions, it looks like a deep blue ocean. We always talk about Grand Seiko executing their dials, but Omega is also known for their dials, and here's a perfect showcase of one of their beautiful dials. I love the look of this sort of deep ocean that you can see on the dial right in front of you. One trick, one gimmick that this watch also has is that if you shine some UV light on the dial, you have a fun sort of cartoon revealed to you. It says Omega was here and has sort of a picture of a submarine with an Omega logo. Maybe the submarine theme was a bit untimely, or maybe very timely, depends on your point of view. Nevertheless, it's a cool kind of comic gimmick. It's very on brand with Omega. They like to take these sort of risks and be a little bit more fun and not take themselves too seriously, and I think this watch sort of represents that perfectly. If I were to rank all of them, I'd say my favorite is the Seamaster 300, the classic one in a blue color variation. Then it would be this Ultra Deep. Then it would be the 38mm Aqua Terra. After that, the Planet Ocean 600 meters. Then Aqua Terra World Time. Then Aqua Terra 41mm. And then the 300 Professional. I think this release will be sort of divisive for a lot of Omega fans. Before I film videos like this on purpose, I don't want to look at any of the feedback from online or any articles or anything like that, because then it can skew my perception of the release. I just want to give you my opinion, my thoughts, and then I'm gonna read the discourse, but I'm gonna guess that this one is gonna be probably divisive because it's not what a lot of people were expecting. I think what people were expecting is for Omega to focus on one model like the Seamaster 300 and maybe do something with the bracelet, do something different with the dial, maybe change up some things, just really focus on one model and make that one watch very special. But instead they released sort of 8 different models with very slight changes. A bit of a risk, and I don't know how people will react to that. So there are some positives, some negatives. To sum it up, some of the other positives that I find. Number one, these watches are actually available. It's weird to say that it's a positive, but we do live in a world where watch companies would release watches and then you can't buy them. These watches here, especially if you have a boutique in your city like we do here in Vancouver, you can go in and order one of these watches, and I would recommend going into boutique because they can probably get you one a little bit faster. You'll have to wait, but you can get your hands on these watches if you really wanted one. Another thing, prices, they are slightly higher than your standard versions of this model, but they're not outrageous. I think Omega is being quote unquote reasonable with their prices. And lastly, these color variations, they work pretty well on some models, which brings me to some of the dislikes about this release. The color variations don't work very well on some of the other models, at least for me personally. You know, it's a personal choice. Another sort of negative of this release is that it's not exactly what people wanted or were asking for. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, but it's just a negative nevertheless. And also, I just feel like these models are not special enough. 75th anniversary is a big deal. And of course, as an Omega fan, you want to see something different. You want to see something crazy. I think the closest we came to that was that Ultra Deep with the UV light on the dial, and the dial itself is very special. I wished to see more of these sort of things on other models in the lineup, but we haven't really seen all that much sort of quirkiness from Omega, which is a bit disappointing. But those were just my thoughts, my opinions on this release. Leave your thoughts in a comment section below. Thank you for watching this video all the way until the end. If you enjoyed it, give a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss more videos like this in the future. Huge thank you to Omega Boutique here in Vancouver for letting me get my hands on and film these watches. And we'll see you next time. Bye.